hi, Jason. Hi. Um,
Hello.
hi. I think my lighting's not so good here. Um, so my question is, I come from
Your
a
lighting's
Christian.
great.
Okay, thanks. So
You're
my
good.
question, thanks, is I come from a Christian background. So I was brought up in a Christian background, and then did a theology degree. So, I've really grown and changed, and now I'm doing Magic Me, which has been amazing because I feel like it's all these layers, like historically, all of this. So my question specifically is, in the Christian worldview, we don't really have a concept for karma.
Not sin is not similar.
We don't really have a concept for karma, and I was just wondering if you could speak to that. How?
Oh, are you?
Oh,
Oh,
hi
I
there.
think
Sorry about that. My
yeah.
internet connection is unstable. Yeah. So my
Okay, just
question.
do audio. If you
Yeah,
go
I'll
audio,
do
that'd
that.
be
So in the Christian worldview, we don't really have a concept of karma. And I'm just wondering, like, how is karma related to sin? And if they are, because I just want to understand it better and try and put it together in a worldview.
yeah. So there's slightly similar concepts, but also not. I mean, obviously, sin is the direct analogy to karma, in the sense that um, it's like let me put it. I'll just put it this way, like from my own experiences. Like when you're a kid, you have, and maybe you can share if you see it differently. That when you're a kid and you're considering the idea of sin, it's like you get this kind of cartoon version, which is that oh, like if I participate in X activity, like I'm going to be tormented by devils in hell forever, and that there's some metaphysical punishment or a lightning bolt is going to come and strike me down. And then, Robert Anton Wilson talks about like, well, I took the Lord's name in vain and no lightning bolt came down and struck me, so I realized it was bullshit. It's like, okay, well, this is a total fedora version of level of understanding. And when you're an adult, you realize that, as my friend Billy Burbanks, an Anarchy magician, put it so incredibly one time, um, uh, sins are their own punishment, right? The act itself is its own punishment, right? In the sense that if you lie, now you have to live with that lie, and if you um, commit um, if you commit a murder hypothetically, then you have to live with that guilt, and that you have to live with that suffering on your conscience for the rest of your life. And the unless someone is truly a sociopath, right, or psychopath. But for most people, for most normally oriented people, the sensation of having done what you know is wrong, and perhaps seeing the suffering caused to both yourself and to other people, and understanding you're responsible for that is its own form of punishment, and in some cases its own form of hell, because it now becomes inescapable, right? So karma is very similar. I mean, they're really just different angles on the same human dynamic, right? Which is, the karma of, um, let's say you're a thief, you steal cars, right? It's like, or well, let's say just a theft, you commit a theft. It's like, well, now you bear that mark, right? It's like that sensation goes with you. And so basically the idea of karma and sin in one sense is similar, which is it's orienting people to understanding their actions on a longer time scale. And the whole point of the core point of both sin and karma is a much bigger concept than just good and evil. It's the Western conception of, oh, you have bad karma for bad actions. The karma is much larger. Karma as a principle is essentially the law of inertia for human action. It's that actions don't end; they carry with you forward. They carry forward into the future, right? And so, but the core idea there in terms of morality is similar with sin, where it's simply this: a negative act does not end with the completion of the act, nor does a positive act, right? It stays with you and it doesn't go away, because it modifies your mind stream. And for this reason, the really serious meditators in Buddhism, for instance, Milarepa, basically postulate that every thought is an action. Every thought carries forward into the future, and the thoughts you cultivate determine your state of being. And you see the same idea expressed so beautifully by Christian ascetics, right? Where they're saying, like, where they're saying they're being assailed by sinful thoughts, right? And they're attempting to overcome the thought stream itself within them. When you get into the really extreme, no, not extreme, but when you get into the very, the very honed in aspects of Christian asceticism, it's not really any different from any other meditative tradition, in the sense that the exoteric thing for church, there's always, in every religion, there's an exoteric and an esoteric aspect. So to perhaps oversimplify, in the exoteric aspect, you essentially have spiritual adepts, hopefully, or usually it's just people repeating things out of a book who haven't actually done the practice themselves. But you have people, who have undergone spiritual practice telling the lay people who have not undertaken spiritual practice themselves, don't do this, don't do that, and do that. It's basically like you go to a doctor and the doctor says, here's what you should do to be healthy. You should eat this and don't eat that, right? Spirituality is the same, where you have people who have studied at medical school, but spiritual medical school, saying, here's how to live a good life. And they often teach in parables. They often teach in stories. And so there's a great breakdown of communication that happens where people take the stories as literal rather than teaching tools. But in the esoteric aspect, where you have people actually doing spiritual practice. So in Christianity, examples of that in Christianity would be some of the Catholic holy orders. It would be some of the monastics within the Eastern Orthodox tradition, and many, many other examples, right? Where you have people instead of where the lay people are just trying to follow a set of strictures for how to live a good life. Oh, well, don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. When it comes to spiritual asceticism, you have people attempting to conquer their own mind stream, right? They're attempting to conquer the thought itself that produces in the case of Christianity, sinful action. So the Orthodox, for instance, have a very clear understanding where it's like, well, it begins, sinful acts begin as thoughts and then turn into action, right? And because, to be scientific, the executive function of the brain is poorly developed, and it becomes highly developed in skilled meditators, right? And so, or to quote another great holy, or to quote a great unholy figure, Lou Reed. Lou Reed said, between the thought and the expression lies a lifetime, right? But the Christian meditative, the perversity of some of the shit that comes out of my mouth is unbelievable. But to turn Lou Reed's comment into a Christian monastic comment, it's like between the thought and the expression, as is often expressed by mystics, is between the thought and the expression is a gap, is a window, right? And that is the moment that you have to cut something off, right? And so that's why meditation allows you to develop tremendous executive function in the frontal cortex of the brain, in order, whatever the frontal lobes, to short circuit a thought before it manifests into reality. The more you have of that, the closer to angelic consciousness you are, or rather the closer to sainthood. The less you have of that, the more demonic or criminal-like you have. Here's a counterexample. Police officers, I talked to some police officers I've talked to. We'll have, one police officer I talked to, or, he was an LAPD SWAT veteran for 30 years, where he said that normal people do not understand the consciousness of criminals. They have no conception. What determines the conscience of people who are felons, like career felons, is that they literally have no executive function. They are not able to interrupt that. And so when you think about what are the worst cases of sin, murder, theft, robbery, all, burglary, all violent arson, all this stuff, it's like the people, by and large, unless they are ideologically motivated, and even within ideological movements, you often find people who are by nature psychopathic gravitate towards them as a theater for their innate violence rather than any ideological motivation. For criminals, like he said, he would arrest people. Somebody just shot somebody on the street. And then he would arrest them, and he would have them in the back of the car, and he would say, "Why did you do that? Why?" Like literally, like, I'm curious. Why did you do that? It's like, because I felt like it. Because he was looking at me funny, right? And what he came to realize, this police officer, is there's literally no gap between thought. Like like what defines criminality is a complete lack of impulse control, like complete and total, and no conception of life other than the present moment. It's just like, oh, I saw that thing, I wanted it, I took it. That guy made me angry, so I killed him, right? It's like, this is the criminal mindset. And his point was that normal people, quote unquote normal people, literally cannot conceptualize this. And like, they don't understand that this is even possible, because it doesn't even like interact with their world at all. They assume that, oh, if somebody is behaving, they must have been abused as children or something like that. Well, it's more like they literally have no impulse control. They're just like here and there. And so this is fascinating to think about in terms of, if you contrast that with somebody who's a skilled meditator, who's able to literally interrupt a thought in between, like literally able to interrupt a thought before it even like barely leaves the emergence from the nervous system. This is now the mystic understanding of sin, which is the same as the Hindu meditative or the Buddhist meditative idea of karma. The Buddhist and Hindu meditative karma is the idea of karma is that one has almost incalculable negative karma from the past, and this is simply the energy from negative acts carrying forward into the future, but also even a positive acts. And the difference between the Buddhist and the Christian view, or the Hindu view, is that Buddhists are attempting to square up. They're attempting to get to zero, meaning they don't want any karma. They don't want good or bad karma. In some cases, that's different with Mahayana and Vajrayana. But they're attempting to just get to zero so they can leave the casino. Whereas Christianity, Mahayana Buddhism, and many of the other traditions, even within the Eastern traditions, are very much attempting to over-accumulate positive karma, or good acts, right? And so Mahayana Buddhism and Christianity are so similar that we can very clearly see that they developed at the same period of world history. So we can clearly see that there was influence of Mahayana Buddhism on Christianity. We can clearly see that it is almost certain that the historical Christ must, or whoever, the people who created the Christian school, whether or not there was a historical Christ, and the consensus seems to be that there was, whoever created those texts clearly were students of Mahayana Buddhism, because Christ perfectly expresses the ideals of Mahayana Buddhism in a way that was more regionally specific. So I'm getting a little into the weeds there, but there's a lot of angles on that. But I think that the core idea there is that thoughts and actions are not only things, but their energy carries forward into the future. You cannot escape your own, and the Hindu idea of karma is that, one of the problems is that people will take a negative act and nothing will happen. So they think that there's no reaction, or they will take a positive act and nothing will happen. So they will say there's no point, but they can't see that it's just going to manifest like 7 years in the future, right? Like, let's say you do, a really cheesy example would be like, someone's broke down on the side of the road, you pull over, you help them. And then like 18 years later, you're pulled over, you're broke down on the side of the road, and somebody pulls over and helps you. And you don't even remember that you helped somebody else. It's like, wow, somebody just showed up and helped me. This is perhaps an overly cartoonish example, but that would be a general Hindu description of things. Is that helpful a little bit at least?
Yeah, super helpful. And I think in particularly because I did the Adept and I'm doing the Magic Me courses and seeing how it all converges. And I've been reading the John Dee book, which is again, like really fantastic. It really feels like it's drawing things together. You're welcome. Thank you. I'm particularly interested then because in the Christian worldview, sin is dealt with by forgiveness. And that's why I was like, well, if I'm trying to be responsible in the external world and clear karma. I was just really, that was why I wanted to ask the question, like, how do these interact? Clearing karma and forgiveness, and I realized because of the excerpt you've just read, there's internal and external work.
Yeah, And that forgiveness is really interesting, right? Where it's like, well, I mean, it's like with Lord's Prayer, forgive us, forgive them, help me to forgive those who trespass against me. What is it? Why is my mind blanking? There's an understanding in the Lord's Prayer that, you're asking for forgiveness, but therefore you need to forgive those who trespass against you, right? If you want to be forgiven, you need to forgive other people, right? Because otherwise, what's going on? And in the New Testament, I think this came up last time too. In the New Testament, Christ says something to the effect of, look, all debts are paid, right? Like the debt of sin has been paid for humanity by the crucifixion. But can you guys at least not be dicks and glorify this? Essentially, it's like uphold this, live by this example by forgiving each other as I have forgiven you. Like, yes, the debt is paid, but like, I'm doing this so that, you kind of act like it, right? So, this is my like street level understanding of Christianity, but there's a deeper understanding there, right? Where if the internal and the external are the same, how can you achieve there's a very Christianity doesn't, one of the great things I have great respect for Christianity is it doesn't pull any punches, right? It starts you from the perspective of you're lower than dirt, right? Christianity starts you from the perspective of you're a sinner, right? We're all sinners, right? And for that reason, like where can you get off standing in judgment of people? And it's interesting to contrast this historically with prior religions, where you compare this to prior religions where it's essentially you have like a priesthood class or caste, in a position of life and judging over people's lives and deaths, human sacrifice, people using religion to say like, oh, well, you're not worthy, so you have to be a slave forever and your descendants will all be slaves because you're a different caste. In the case of India, Christianity is such a radical departure from that. And it's okay. So we were talking about the outer and the internal. It's like, well, if you're working to change yourself or save yourself, I mean, it's like you can do it externally. It's like it's like if you have committed theft and somebody steals from you, and you forgive them, aren't you also forgiving that part of yourself which committed your own theft, right? Aren't you at least working towards, let's just say, emotional maturity? Let's just say you're working towards, healing. You're healing yourself through your interactions within the world. I'm not sure if I'm being totally eloquent about this, but hopefully...
No, it makes total sense. It really does. It's like what we do to others, we're also doing to some part of ourselves. And so...
Yeah, that's better put.
No, brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.